Well, good evening. Hello, everybody. Welcome into the program. This is the Slate. We are a DraftKings show. We take you up until 6 o'clock on this Tuesday. It is our first opportunity on this program, at least, to reflect and now look ahead to Divisional Round weekend. Yes, we're reflecting on Super Wildcard weekend. Brendan Glasheen. We have Gary and Thorne. He's in the middle of your screen. And then off to the right is Cozy Matt LaMarca. So
always.
This is the crew for today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in YouTube as well as Twitch. We will discuss. Who wants to go first? Gary, and you sound like you want to talk. What do you got for us as far as what happened this weekend? Sorry about Miami. Sorry about the Dolphins. A valiant effort. They put up 3 valiant efforts against this team this year. What were your big takeaways from the weekend?
Yeah, he's muted.
One sec. There we go. I'm here. Sorry, I had some profane things to say about the Dolphins. No, that's not true, actually. They were fine. Exceeded my expectations. I would say worst case scenario for me was holding a Bills -10 ticket and then having the Dolphins cover but lose. Kind of middling myself in a bad way. Yeah, look, I think the games in general, and this kind of builds off of that Buffalo-Miami game, I was sort of just surprised how competitive they were across the board up until Monday. But, you can't really go 6 for 6. I think that would have been probably too much to ask. And the Buccaneers finally weren't able to pull out a stunning fourth quarter performance against a team that was just much better than they were. But yeah, you look at what this sort of sets up. I mean, we've got some fantastic matchups heading into the divisional round. We finally get a chance to get a full game of Buffalo at Cincinnati. And I think what we saw this past weekend, both positive and negative from Buffalo and Cincinnati, really does set up a very interesting game in that capacity. I'm just really excited. I thought the football exceeded my expectations, and that's all you can really ask for. It was a good football watching weekend.
I would tend to agree. I hope we don't get a dud, LaMarca, in the divisional round weekend, because I think folks like Garion mostly expected coming into the weekend we'd get, just like last year, favorites would blow teams out. You wouldn't get many competitive games. I think we found out that the coaching in this league might be at a decent place. John Harbaugh, I think we've always considered as a pretty decent coach. Coached up Tyler Huntley in round 3 against the same team. They played each other in week 18. Mike McDaniel, to Garion's point, pieced it together enough to hang in there against Buffalo on the road with Skylar Thompson. Now, there's some Brandon Staley stuff, too. That's where the other side of the argument would be. Doug Peterson has channeled something through Trevor Lawrence, at least in the second half. They've got some chemistry. I don't know. I came out of it like pretty good weekend. And Mike McCarthy even looked half decent, too.
Yeah, I mean, it was like Gary said, overall, it was a very enjoyable week of games. And I'm encouraged heading into what is potentially what should be the best football weekend of the year, right? It's our last time with 4 games, and they should all be solid ones. We've got some really good teams. There are some surprises there, too, for sure. But overall, I'm expecting 4 pretty competitive contests.
And the numbers reflect not a single game that has a double-digit spread. Now, there were some cases, looking at the DraftKings Sportsbook now, there were some cases in last week's slate where Seattle and San Francisco, there were some 10s, dropped to 9.5. You could even at one point get Baltimore at +10 against the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, the Bills and Dolphins game, significant line movement based on the quarterback, who played and who wouldn't play. And of course, we found out Skylar Thompson was the man midway through the week. So those were some circumstances where you felt you get 3 stinkers, and we didn't, right? So all these games are inside a touchdown. Jags, Chiefs. Chiefs are laying 8.5 at home. They had the bye. The other team that had the bye was Philadelphia. They're laying over a touchdown, 7.5. Bengals getting 5 at Buffalo. As Gary had mentioned, we finally get this game, but it's in Buffalo. And Dallas, San Francisco has already had some movement. This opened at 4, and now the Niners are inside of 4 at 3.5 as favorites against the Dallas Cowboys coming off the win last night. Gary, and is there a spot now, and totals too? There are 3 totals now below 50. Is there a total now or a side that you look at and think, I want to go out and get this now?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I'm glad I didn't bet Bengals Bills this afternoon, because I liked the Bengals at 4.5 and now they're 5. I got a feeling Matt and I are probably going to feel pretty similar about these 2 spots, just kind of thinking back about some similar spots throughout the year. But that game and Jacksonville, Kansas City really sort of stand out to me. I mean, at a certain point, as much as I respect the Chiefs and just how dominant their offense continues to be by all the advanced metrics, they're not great at covering. The last 2.5, 3 seasons, they're one of the worst teams at covering in the NFL. And granted, that's a byproduct of some inflated spreads and just the fact they are one of the more public teams in the NFL. They're a team that everyone associates with being able to score big points and win games. So it's more perception than actual play that has hurt their ATS record. But 8.5 seems pretty big. And I've got some serious question marks about Jacksonville's defense. I think they're, in a general sense, a very weak unit. But I think you can have similar questions about Kansas City's defense. And right now, with how Trevor Lawrence, I mean, I don't think you can throw 4 interceptions against the Chiefs and get away with it quite like they did against Los Angeles. But right now, yeah, I would say taking Jacksonville in the points and taking the Bengals in the points, those are probably where I'm leaning most strongly on Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, it looks like folks have jumped in on Jacksonville. I wonder, though, is there any possibility of this rising to a 9 or a 9.5 because folks might be convinced Kansas City is the good public side? Then again, you watch that game Saturday night, you think, whoa, maybe Trevor Lawrence is right up there with the top echelon of quarterbacks in the AFC, that maybe he can hang around. So I guess the public perception might be it's too many points, take the Jags. I don't know. I wonder if some late money then swoops in on the Chiefs, if that number falls a bit. But right now it's been 8.5 since the beginning, since that line opened. Do you have thoughts, Lamarca, on this game, the first one?
Yeah, the first one meaning the Bills and Bengals or Jags Chiefs?
Well, I meant Jags Chiefs because that's the first one of the weekend.
You are correct, sir.
But no, that's fair because Gary brought up one. Just go. I get it. I get what you meant now.
I lean towards Jacksonville in that game as well. I do worry that they are becoming a very public team.
They're America's team, according to one person we both know.
America's team for sure.
America's team, yes.
But yeah, how can you not watch that comeback last week and not want to get on the Jags bandwagon, right?
Right.
They played the worst first half possible, first playoff game for a lot of those players, and they came back and won the game. Doug Peterson with that brilliant 4th down call, everybody in the building, everybody in America, myself included, expecting the QB sneak and, to give it to Etienne on a little outside handoff. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I think Jacksonville, this is probably too many points. But again, I just worry that they are becoming like a trendy underdog pick. And if you look at some of the early betting numbers, 94% of the dollars on Jacksonville in this game.
But that's why I think, to Glash's point, bet this now, because if this gets anywhere close to 7 or a key number like that, that's when this starts getting a little worrisome. But I mean, the Chiefs this season, obviously regular season for a team that, is kind of the most, I think we said this before, the most NBA regular season NFL team we have. They certainly have a switch. They play with their food. They sort of breeze in it. They're literally running Ring Around the Rosie, Pocket Full of Posy during a regular season game. They screw around, and I think they can lock it in a little bit more in the playoffs, but 1-6-1 ATS at Arrowhead this year. There's such a massive gap between the public perception of the Chiefs and the public perception of Arrowhead as a home field advantage with how that's actually worked out betting them at home this season. So yeah, bet this now while it's 8.5, because with the way the money's coming in, if this goes down to 7.5 or 7, that's when you might start backing a little bit away from America's team.
Right. I would tend to agree, and maybe, yeah, based on the dollars, like Lamarcus said, hard to believe we get anywhere above 8.5 to maybe 9, I suppose. But as of right now, it's looking like it's going to go the other direction. Patrick Mahomes is 6-3 against the spread at home in his playoff career, 4-1 against the spread in divisional and wild card rounds, covering the spread by an average of 6.9 points per game. And
So here's I got a trend for you.
okay.
That applies to both the Chiefs and Eagles this week. So teams coming off of a bye in the wild card round, favored by at least a touchdown in the divisional round.
Yep.
15, 22, and 1 against the spread since 2004. So covering less than 40% of the time.
Rust, that dreaded rust.
Yeah, and it's a different looking Kansas City team, right? In the playoffs. I'm just two different seasons here. I know they've pieced it together and they've been a comparable offense without Tyreek Hill, but
I mean, we should be clear. They've been the best offense by every offensive metric in the league.
Yep.
Like they've been better than they were last season by some metrics.
This is true, but I'm talking the screw
just saying,
around.
Just so people don't get on us about like they've been fine without Tyreek Hill. Like they have 100%. They have been fine without Tyreek Hill.
But to your point,
I think if I was looking to play the Chiefs in this game, I would wait. I think that honestly, like if I'm going to bet the Jaguars, the first half is probably the way I would be looking to attack that game. We have seen it time and time again. The Chiefs just do not start games well for one reason or another. But they are just never out of the game and can turn things around in an instant. So I think Jaguars first half, or, if the Jaguars jump out to an early lead, then you potentially look to play the Chiefs live. Something like that, I think is how I'm really looking to attack the game primarily.
How would you feel about like a 7-point tease here where you just take like the Chiefs -1.5 and the over? What would the over be in that scenario? Like 46?
Yeah, roughly. So I don't like teasing totals.
agree.
You're not getting nearly the same type of value, but Chiefs -8.5, -9, that is a perfect candidate for a teaser leg. Teasing 8.5 point favorites is literally my favorite time to tease teams, right? Because if you move at the standard 6 points, you're getting 3 key numbers. You're getting 7, you're getting 4, and you're getting 3. So teasing favorites like that is one of the few times that I will actually implement it. It's called a Wong teaser. It has a name. You can look it up if you're interested in it. But the goal of a tease should be to get as many key numbers as possible. And the Chiefs fit that criteria.
Because of being 8.5 point favorites. Now, if you like the Chiefs also, just the single game itself, what would be nice too, Lamarca, to your point, is if it gets down to 7.5, you're just talking Chiefs and a teasing.
I would be shocked if it got down that low.
Yeah.
I mean, if that much money has come in on Jacksonville and it hasn't moved yet, it might not move.
Right.
I think that if it got below 8, the Sharps would really make their presence known.
Yeah.
What kind of chance do we give the Giants? Speaking of public perception and folks getting all high and mighty about their teams. I mean, there's a lot of Giants fans out there, but folks that may believe in this team. Dayball, Coach of the Year. Daniel Jones has been turned loose in a good way the last month or so. It feels like they're taking the training wheels off Daniel Jones and saying, okay, here you go. We're going to start letting you throw the ball around a little bit more. Say again?
I said it's crazy that, like I saw something that he might get $40 million per year this offseason. And I had Giant fan friends tell me, yeah, that's the going rate for a quarterback these days. They couldn't wait to get rid of this guy last year, and now they're willing to give him $40 million per. So I'm honestly like, and this is no disrespect to the Giants. I still don't know how they're here. Right. I was on the Giants last week to beat the Vikings. But like you look at that roster top to bottom, and it's easily one of the 10 worst in the league, if not one of the 5 worst. But I think, to go back to the point you made to start the show, Glash, coaching really does matter. And these guys have played hard for Dable and Wink Martindale. And, then you add in a little bit of confidence and all of a sudden you got some momentum rolling downhill. So I don't see why the Giants will stop covering now. I mean, the Eagles are a much tougher matchup than what they saw last week, but they have a few things going for them. For starters, divisional underdogs in playoff matchups have historically done very well. We saw it last week with the Ravens and the Dolphins, 2 games that were not expected to be close, ended up being, much closer than expected. And even Seattle, I know that game got away from them in the second half, but Seattle played San Francisco very tough until an untimely Geno Smith fumble, and then the wheels kind of fell off. So I'm almost always going to grab this many points in a divisional game. Historically, there have been 28 divisional playoff matchups since 2005. The underdog is 16-11-1 against the spread. So not like a huge positive sample size, but I do think that for the most part, you want to be looking at the points in these divisional matchups.
Gary, and this has a very old school Giants feel to this team. Like Daniel Jones, is he the guy? Is he not? He makes enough plays though. And like LaMarcus said, he's got friends texting him. We can't get rid of this guy fast enough. I mean, they got a nice piece in their offense in Saquon Barkley. There was a guy named OBJ who was their big piece as far as a weapon, receiver, or running back. And then just a bunch of guys, and I can't name them right now. I'd have to look them up for you, the receivers that caught balls in that game against the Vikings. And their defense, they were coached up. But Dayball's got real control of the operation. Daniel Jones also had the game of his life. And to LaMarcus' point, if he doesn't have that game, he's probably not making the $40 million. They're ready to go right into the market and find another quarterback.
It is a very interesting spot. And, Matt did a great job of laying out all the different angles you can look at this game in. And I would say that, looking at last week, it really is a cautionary tale for not taking the narrative of a third divisional matchup in a season a little bit more seriously. I mean, I was someone who thought the Bills would beat the Dolphins by 40 points. I texted many a Bills fan friend saying something along those lines throughout the course of the week. And, who knows if it was just Josh Allen having the most Josh Allen-iest game of his young playoff career that kept the Dolphins in that matchup, a couple fortunate bounces here and there. But I think there's something to be said for a team seeing another team for the third time, and for just 2 organizations that know each other so well. There won't be any surprises. There's nothing off the table. There's nothing. There's no shock value in this game for either of these coaching staffs. And we've talked it into the ground, but when you've got a Brian Daboll controlling your offense and you've got a Wink Martindale controlling your defense, there's just a level of trust. There's a floor added with those 2 minds controlling these 2 units, and their ability to get more out of a player or out of a unit than maybe the skill level says on a depth chart has been phenomenal so far this season. So I'm not nearly as inclined or excited to bet the Giants in this spot as I was to bet the Giants last week. I think that game was more about my perception of the Vikings and less so my perception of the Giants. And I'm not nearly as inclined to bet the Giants plus 7.5 as I am to, again, take the Jaguars or to take the Bengals. But it's a pretty big number. And the Giants are 8-2 ATS in their last 10 games. They're 7-1 ATS on the road this season.
Yep.
Defense and a running game travels. And I think they're pretty well coached. Not to say Philadelphia isn't. I mean, they are also clearly a very, very sturdy team. But 7.5 seems like a lot. And I think as long as you can get this above 7, I would be inclined to be on the side of New York.
Giants were the best covering team in the National Football League all year. 4-0 against the number in the second meeting against the opposing team. Now, that game against the Eagles, we know Jalen Hurts played. That second game against the Eagles, they lost 22-16. They covered a giant spread, 17 points. Eagles needed the game to secure the 1 seed. And we talk trends. There's a lot of really nice trends out there if you're a Daniel Jones supporter. Daniel Jones is an underdog on the road, 18-7 against the number in his career on the road against the spread, 27-15 as an underdog against the spread. And as a road dog, Daniel Jones, so you get the road numbers, 11 games over 500 against the number. As a dog, 12 games over 500. As a road underdog, Daniel Jones is 17-5.
Wow.
That's incredible.
I mean, I'll say this too, like the Giants surprised me last week. And I think this is how you had to win that game against the Vikings. Like the Vikings are such a porous defense in general, but specifically against stopping the pass, that a smart game plan is to exploit that area of the Vikings defense. And their pass rate over expectation, I know our friend Adam Levitan tweeted this out earlier today, one of the highest differentials between their expected pass rate and their pass rate over expectation in that wild card round. Like Daniel Jones, when called upon, they were like, hey, Daniel, this is your game. You're going to have to beat the Vikings today. And he did it. And the Vikings stink. Let's not overlook the fact the Vikings defense stinks, but he was able to do it. And yeah, 7.5 is a lot of points.
One thing too, I will say in the Giants' favor is that this is going to be the first playoff start of Jalen Hurts' career. And you add in the fact
he started against Tampa, didn't he?
Second. Remember he started last year against Tampa.
And they rattled him.
Okay. Please continue.
Well, I would say it's his first playoff start with real expectations. How about that?
Yeah,
I'll give you
that's
that
fair.
one.
That's definitely fair.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, it was, I had some numbers lined up, but they clearly don't apply. I will say though, like the pressure of being, trying to win his first playoff game, plus the fact that he's really only played, a half of football in the last month or so. Like, I don't think that this is a spot where Hurts is going to come out on the field and just start lighting the Giants up like he did in that first matchup.
There's no doubt that, and Hurts said it too. He said it after week 18. He said, thankfully we do have a week off. Like he pretty much admitted, like, if we had to play this weekend, it wouldn't have been all that comfortable. And he went as far as to say that. So, and Lane Johnson is back, right? That is a definite, or is that still up in the air? Do we know that for sure? To double check.
It sounded pretty definitive, but I'm not 100%.
Well, Lane Johnson says he's playing versus Giants.
There you go.
Right.
Sounds pretty definitive.
Okay. Because they did say the rest of the regular season, but you know how that goes. Sometimes teams will put that out there just to be hopeful, and then you get to the playoff game.
Easy PR release.
Okay.
Sunday. All right, let's talk about my favorite game of the week.
All right. Whoa, man. Fine. Just trying to host the show. No, I'm just kidding. Bengals, Bills. Buffalo minus 5. Totals at 49. Now, when these teams met, trying to remember when they met, well, the game that was canceled, of course. Game was in Cincinnati. The Bills were road favorites. Is that correct? Do I have that right? Do I remember?
I believe it was 2 or 2.5.
Yeah, it was like 1.5, 2 points, something like that.
Okay.
So I think it was a 1.5 by the time the game kicked off.
Okay. So now they're home, and they've basically been awarded 3 points for being at home. Right, LaMarca? Isn't that the way you kind of look at it?
1.5 in each direction. I mean, that might honestly be underselling home field advantage a little bit. I constantly yell at Kaufman about the fact that home field isn't worth 3 points anymore.
Oh no, I tend to agree. I'm just trying to figure out how you go from 2 to 5. That's all I'm asking.
No, I think that if you look at some of the betting data, the sharps would agree with you that it hasn't been enough. This is a really interesting spot. It's looking like a major sharps versus square spot, which concerns me because I, like Gary, and looked at this game and initially liked the Bengals. Joe Burrow, since the start of last year, has just been so good at covering the spread as an underdog, including 6-0 against the spread when getting more than a field goal. So I thought that, typically when you're getting a elite quarterback, and I think Burrow is probably in that tier now, taking points with them is almost always a good idea. But the sharps look at this Bengals team and they see a team that has been incredibly fortunate of late. You look at the touchdown they scored to win against Baltimore last week. some of the games to end the regular season. You had Tampa Bay turning the ball over on 5 straight possessions after kind of dominating them in the first half.
Yep.
You have Patriots going in for a game-winning score before Ramondre Stevenson fumbled.
Yep.
So this is a team that is probably a bit overvalued by the general public at the moment just because of some fluky results. So I think that the Sharps mentality is I'm going to be fading them with a really good Buffalo team. If the Bengals show up and play like they did last week, they're not going to beat the Bills.
Well, I think that's the major.
They shouldn't have won that
concern.
game. Truly, the Bengals should not have won.
Correct.
Well, and here's the thing, and I believe you talked about this last Tuesday, Matt, when we were, or no, I wasn't here Tuesday. I think it was Jeff was talking about this on Thursday, where that number had, I think it was sitting at like 8.5. And he was just saying, like, the Ravens can generate a lot of pressure with their front four. And that Bengals offensive line was bad going into that game.
Historically, Joe Burrow's worst performances have all come against the Ravens this year.
Yeah. And I mean, we saw they sort of shoved this stat down our throats during that broadcast, but Joe Burrow's been sacked more than any other quarterback throughout his first 5 playoff starts in his career. We don't have an injury report yet. The first injury report of the week will be released tomorrow, but if Carmen's playing left tackle, if they're down another 2 offensive linemen,
yep.
I mean, look, it's Joe Burrow and those skill position guys can overcome that. The Dolphins were playing with 3 backup offensive linemen last week and almost beat the Bills. Like it can happen, but Buffalo, even without Von Miller, can generate so much pressure with their front four. Tre'Davious White looked really good in that game against the Dolphins. He had a couple plays where he made up ground on Jalen Waddle to make plays. That's very hard to do. Buffalo's defense can be really good. And that's the thing to take away too. When you're looking at that Dolphins-Bills game, a lot like the first Dolphins win of the season, the total yardage in that game was something like 400 to 200 again. Like the Bills defense was given short field to defend after short field to defend. The Dolphins scored a defensive touchdown. Their first touchdown of the game was after a Cedric Wilson 55-yard punt return. Like that wasn't on the Bills defense. They were perfectly fine in that game. This was all Josh Allen.
I really think the Bills are the Golden State Warriors, right? When they show up and play their best game, they can run teams out of the building.
Yeah.
But both teams have the same Achilles heel, which is they are extremely turnover prone. So if Buffalo is going to give short fields to Joe Burrow, I don't think it's going to work out quite as well as it did against Skylar Thompson.
They're not going to settle for 4 field goals or whatever it was. Yeah.
Well, and it feels too, is that whichever team in this matchup can hide their flaws the best probably wins. And we've talked about the Bengals, and just to name some names here, it's Kappa, who left the game questionable the other day, and then Jonah Williams is one who may have dislocated his kneecap. Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, his reporting there. Offensive tackle for Cincinnati. We have La'el Collins, who's out or injured. He did not play in the game. He was placed on injured reserve. My issue, Lamarca, with Golden State, the Golden State comparison is Golden State could play defense too. Now, not to say the Bills can't. Micah
Bills
Hyde
are top 5 in DVOA defensively.
Yeah, again, that was a real weird performance last week, and it wasn't all on them.
It was not. Their defense got the short end of the stick because their offense becomes so Josh Allen reliant and so Josh Allen predictable that if Allen just wants to keep, there was a drive in the third quarter where he went back to throw deep down the sideline 3 times when they have a lead. I think there was when they were up 10.
Again, literally the moment that changed the game, the Bills are up 17-0 with the ball at the 50-yard line, averaging like 7 yards a play. And they decide to take a deep shot on 1st and 10 to John Brown.
Smokey!
Which, love John Brown, don't get me wrong. Like that touchdown he scored in week 18, incredible stuff. But, Xavier Howard picks off that pass and suddenly the Dolphins have a little bit of life. Like,
right.
Josh Allen, if he could ever just check down like 15% more than he does, I think his ADOT in that game was over 15 yards. And he hit some of those, and there were a couple close calls too. Like, there was that play right before the end of the second quarter where seemed like they had a 55-yard completion, and it touched the ground a little bit as the guy was bringing it in. Like, again, a lot went wrong for the Bills, and they were still able to win a game they should have won. But yeah, I'm going to bet Cincinnati at this number, but I would say the thing that would like keep me up at night once I place that bet is that offensive line, because the Bills could really dominate in the trenches in this game.
Yeah, it's just something to think about. Now, I know it's easy to overreact to how Buffalo looked against the Dolphins, but they've been like this all year. Just not for a full game, but in spots. And we talked about turning it on, turning it off with Kansas City. Buffalo is very much like that too. Home run hitting style.
Sure.
And when they're at their best, they're at their best, right? So
Warriors.
that's all. What? Say it again.
Warriors.
No, that's kind of disrespecting the Warriors, in my opinion. Warriors have won something.
Okay, that's fair.
Just saying. Okay, Cowboys, Niners. Any taking the cheese on Dallas? Anybody?
It's tough.
Is it?
I think I like the Niners.
No, let me sell you. Let me sell you on the Cowboys, Carrion.
You know what it was? It's almost like a kid taking a multiple choice test, and I'd guess C too many times in a row. It's like I got to take a favorite, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but I think the Cowboys are my favorite side of the week. Okay. So the Cowboys were, I think, harshly punished for how they looked in Week 18 in essentially a meaningless game against Washington. Yep. People took that result. They took Tampa Bay, who I guess had one good game in the whole season. And they were like, yeah, Tom Brady, he's figuring it out at the right time. Myself included. I fell for the trap. But Dallas was just clearly the better team. And San Francisco, I think, has gotten to the point now where they are just so public that it's time to go in the opposite direction. Brock Purdy has been very impressive. There's no denying that. It's also incredibly fair to say that he hasn't had to do very much. All he's had to do is get the ball in the hands to guys who are pretty much wide open. And when you look at the defenses he's played this year, it's Tampa Bay, Seattle twice, Washington, Vegas, and Arizona. That's about as easy as it gets. He's going to see his first real test this week against the Cowboys, who can really get after the passer. The public, unsurprisingly, loves the 49ers in this spot. I said this earlier today on a radio hit. I'm going to steal the same exact bit. I think at this point, if I was playing quarterback for the 49ers, the public would still bet them. That's how much they believe in the rest of this roster. But ultimately, this is still a quarterback's game. And I will take Dak Prescott getting a field goal and a half over Brock Purdy basically every day of the week.
I think that's fair. Look, I was struggling with this one the most just because, yeah, it's still kind of hard to bet on Brock Purdy as a favorite.
They got a tremendous roster.
Well, that's the thing. You're betting on the system, and this is, like more than a decade of this, basically, where it's just like, Matt Ryan won an MVP because of Kyle Shanahan. This is just what he does, and they just looked so unstoppable. And granted, Seattle's defense is terrible, and you pointed that out. He's had a relatively cream puff schedule to sort of like ease his way into this job. And I do just worry that like San Francisco's defense is so opportunistic. They're so good at getting pressure with their front four. And Dak did a very good job of avoiding this in that game on Monday against Tampa. But so many times in November and December, despite playing really well in general, he's been mistake prone. He's made those just back-breaking mistakes, And I think San Francisco's a defense that can really force you into one of those spots. Now, that being said, in the regular season, no defense had a higher turnover rate than the Cowboys. They can do the exact same thing to a quarterback who, this is the toughest defense he'll have ever faced.
Last week, some shaky throws last week that weren't punished.
So, yeah. Look, in general, I think 3.5. I've got no problem taking the Cowboys here plus 3.5. These are two sort of like eerily similar teams in a way, and just two great defensive teams. So even if you think like, hey, this game's a coin flip, just take the points. That's not a terrible way to look at it either.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing for sure that is not in Dallas's favor is the schedule, because I think the Niners being at home, their game ends Saturday afternoon. They get a 2-day advantage, basically 2.5 day, when you consider when Dallas probably got home. Now, I know that probably gets overblown, but they have 2.5 days advantage of rest for that roster that is very good and needed the time. Debo, Mitchell, some guys on defense to get back to full strength. That's something I think that doesn't bode well. Their secondary, the San Francisco secondary, can also be had. Gary talked about this. Dak did a great job getting the ball out quickly. Tampa's front seven really didn't do all that much. I thought they were like, okay. They had moments, but not many moments.
What do we make? Sorry to cut you off, Glash, but just kind of thinking too. What do we make of like Brett Maher? Like
that's a factor. I wrote this down too. The kicker thing is a factor.
Yeah. I mean, what if they can't kick a field goal? Like, I know it's fun to laugh at, but
you're betting Dallas. I didn't say to bet Dallas. I mean, you guys are okay with the kicker missing 4 extra points? That's a problem in a big spot. You're not worried about that?
I mean, sabermetrically, if you were to go for every fourth down, that would kind of favor your winning percentage. So I guess you could look at it that way.
Well, I guess based on Lamarcus logic, he could be the quarterback instead of Purdy. Maybe he could be the kicker instead of Maher too.
He got all those misses out of the way last week.
Did hit the last one,
Right. That's all he needed. He's back on track. And I want to just say one more point about Purdy. Like,
Mr. Perfect.
He has been he's been front running this entire time, right?
Yeah.
I would love to see how he responds when he falls into a hole. And I'm not saying that happens this week. Maybe the 49ers are
just trust the Cowboys to do that.
I am trusting them, Glash. I'm trusting them. Okay. I'm trusting the Cowboys. I'm putting my stamp of approval on this game. Dallas Cowboys outright.
How weird is it that we're talking about the Cowboys as the not publicly backed team in a massive playoff game?
For what it's worth, the Sharps are in agreement with me. This line opened at 4.5. It's already down to 3.5 in some locations. Oh, Glash, man. What are you, a Niners guy now?
No, I just tend to think too. Also, keep in mind, last thing I'll say about this game in relation to what happened last night, Tom Brady doesn't like getting hit anymore. And I think Brock Purdy can be a little more elusive than what Tom displayed. So, and some of those balls Brady's throwing on the back foot, Micah Parsons bat the thing down. Like, Dallas looked good, but Brady didn't do him any favors either. I
hope that can at least officially put to end the Tom Brady to San Francisco rumors. Why would they pay $40 million a year for a quarterback downgrade?
It's Vegas.
They're the only team in the league that does not need to spend on a quarterback.
It's Vegas or Miami for me. And then
I don't think it's maybe Miami.
Maybe he goes back. Oh, yeah, that's right. You're a Dolphins fan. Maybe he goes back to Tampa if they move off.
It's not because I'm a Dolphins fan. I just think they tried it once and it didn't go so well. I think they've kind of let that ship sail.
He needs to go back to New England. Him and Bill get back together.
He's on that.
Reunited and it feels so good.
Madden Sims coming up on the
they could make Mac into a slot receiver.
Okay, that's enough. Madden Slate coming up. Cowboys Lions at 6. Brady should go play for Dan Campbell. That'd be fun. Bengals Ravens at 8. Dolphins Eagles at 10. That's your schedule for tonight. Thanks to Matt as well as Eamon behind the scenes. For Gary and Thorin and Matt Lamarca, Brendan Glasheen, you all have a great night. Thanks for tuning in to the Slate. We're back tomorrow night, same time after that 4 o'clock Madden Sim. You get